It's going to take us a couple of minutes to get going. We're going to allow a few more people to jump in. We really appreciate you coming along tonight. For anybody who's been at the Rad Academy before, welcome back. And for any new visitors, make sure after the video to go back and check out our Derailleur 101, some of our other videos like puncture repairs, how to lubricate your drivetrain, where we can go into a little bit more detail. I will reference on some of these courses later on to show some good content that's available to you. So while we're waiting for everyone to jump in, now is a good time to get comfortable. If you're having any issues with the sound, please let us know in the comments and we will get addressed and get into it. So at the start, I'd like to give you a little brief introduction to myself. My name is David Smith. I am the Assembly Supervisor in Seattle, Washington. I got into bikes very late in life. I went to a boarding school, a small country boarding school back in Dublin, Ireland, and I never really got to ride a bike. When I was in school, it wasn't until I got to college that one of my roommates actually convinced me to buy a bike, and my love affair with cycling began. In the beginning, I started off with road cycling, quickly got into some mountain biking, and that turned into a full-fledged love affair with all things bicycles. Currently, I am a full-time e-bike advocate, so I have really fallen in love with electric bikes. Since getting my first one, I really realized how good they are for stress relief, how much fun they are to get out and just cycle, and also how practical they are for commuting, getting to work without putting as much of a sweat on me as my normal analog bike. So if we have a quick look at the start, we're going to do a brief overview of everything that we have here. So we've got some really good learning apparatus to help us out. We're going to start off with the front of the bike. We're going to work our way the whole way through. So mainly I want to give you some tips and tricks to help you maintain your bike in between regular service intervals, to make sure we get the longest lifespan from the bike, from its components, and also to make sure it's running nice and smooth whenever you need to rely on the bike. So just to give a quick brief overview, we're going to start on tires, tubes. We're going to look at what we can do here. We're going to go on to suspension after that. Then we'll go to the chain and the main drivetrain. We'll look at the derailleur, how to clean that. We'll also bring in a second model of a folding bike and show you the kind of different maintenance tips and tricks that you can do on that kind of a bike as opposed to a rigid frame like the Runner Plus that we have here beside us. If anybody was watching the Derailleur 101 video, you will know that I have a love for bicycle fun facts. At that one, we discussed the creation of the derailleur and how that changed the bike industry. So for today, I wanted to have a look at just a couple of quick little fun tips and tricks. One of the main facts we'll look at today is an average bicycle in a car parking space. We can fit 15 bicycles in the same space that one car occupies. So just thinking about that on the facilities end for companies, for people commuting to work, it's far more efficient if you can be self-propelled by a nice bike like this. And also for your pocket or your wallet, the average bike maintenance costs are 20 times less for the same mileage done as in a car. So that's a huge incentive for a lot of people to jump out and get onto a bike. If you have any fun facts, because I know we have a lot of big bike advocates or radvocates out there, feel free to put them in the comments. I'd love to read that when we get finished here. Also, as we go through today's course, it's going to be hard for me to answer all questions, but if you do have one that pops up, please put it into the comments and hopefully at the end we'll get some time to address that. So if everyone is ready, I think we're going to dive in and start to preventative maintain this bicycle. So the first thing that we always do whenever we're working on bikes, or for me particularly, I always like to use a light glove just to make it a little bit easier, to make sure I don't contaminate anything, also make hand washing afterwards much easier. The other thing before we started this video that I've done is I've removed the battery pack. Even though we're not actually going to be doing any real repair work on the bike, it's really preventative, it is still important to take that battery off, make sure that we're not going to get any trouble from the motor, we're not going to actually accidentally actuate anything when we have the bike. So, kind of a pragmatic approach to looking after the bike. I like to start at the tip of the bike and work my way back to make sure I don't forget anything. The first thing we're going to talk about today is tires. Your tire is really important, especially right now for us. We're just coming into fall, coming into winter. Weather and road conditions are not going to be the greatest. So your tire is really important for quite a few things. And keeping it healthy and making sure that it's maintained, that's going to be really what gives you your grip on the road and also your reliability. If you pick up a puncture, it's no fun on your way to work. So keeping a nice Kevlar reinforced tire like this. So this particular model has the K-Rad. So just like a ballistics vest, we have a layer that's put underneath the actual grippy rubber on the outside, and that is going to really help out in stopping shrapnel getting through. Having said that, the soft rubber that gives us our grip on the outside, that's prone to catch glass and other pieces of shrapnel off the road. So the first thing I'm going to do is rotate the tire. I'm gently just having a look through each of the treads. I'm going to see if we have anything inside that we need to actually remove. So we can go straight in. I'm using a small screwdriver, but it's okay if you have tweezers, pliers, anything like this. So if you see anything which is embedded in the tire but not gone through and caused a puncture yet, now is a good time to put that in, remove any shrapnel that's in your tire. This is quite a new bike, so as you can see, the tire pattern is quite good, but I do have some examples from a Rad Rover and a Rad City, which have had a little bit more use and love on the road. So actually on the Rad City, you can see quite a lot of green coming through. This is actually the puncture protective layer that we have laid underneath the grippy rubber. This is a big worry for me. If I see this, I don't have the same total surface area contacting the ground. I'm not going to get the compliance and grip that's going to safely carry me through corners, get me over wet manhole covers, crossing train tracks, anything like that. So if you're inspecting your tire and you see this, first thing I'll be doing is getting a new tire put on that bike. Keep yourself safe on the road. With the Rover tire, it's not quite as bad, still little small spots visible in the center. So again, exact same. From the side profile, we can actually see the puncture protective layer going through underneath the soft rubber. So if you inspect your tire and it's in good condition, the next thing we need to do is put an adequate amount of air inside to protect this rim from touching the ground if we hit any bad potholes, covers, anything like that. So every tire is going to have a different ideal PSI rating, but the good news is if you actually read the side of the tire, it's going to contain all of this information for you. So on a Rad Runner, we're going to look for about 30 PSI. They generally will have a lower and upper window that you can have them between, 25 to 35. This time of year, I'm going to shoot right for in the middle. If there's wet conditions, we might want to lower that a little bit to flatten the tire out and give us a little bit more contact with the road. If you're in perfect dry conditions, you can pump that right up to the maximum and you're going to get fastest rolling resistance. In a professional shop, we would have something small like this, which is a PSI gauge. So it's very easy for me to put this on and tell what pressure is inside the tire. It's not something a lot of home mechanics have. So it's just a very small PSI gauge. The thing that I'm going to suggest for most people at home is what we refer to as a track pump. So a track pump is a large standard pump like this. I prefer a metal body in the center because we need to build up quite a lot of pressure inside. This also has the PSI gauge, which we had before, so it's going to tell you exactly how much air you've put inside that tire. So very, very simply, each pump will have a different way of attaching. This one we're going to push down on the valve, pull up on the lever, and that's going to make it very simple to pump the tire to the exact pressure. So just giving 3 pumps is all it needs, just a quick top up. And this is something that we're going to be doing every couple of weeks to ensure that we're protecting the tire and getting the longest lifespan from the tire. What we've done on the front tire can be repeated exactly on the rear tire, no matter what bike you have. So the same process, remove the shrapnel, make sure the tire is in good condition, pump to the correct PSI, and now we know our tire is good. That's going to last for another couple of weeks before I need to pump that again. After that, on this model, we have a suspension fork. The suspension fork on the front of the bike is there to absorb any small impacts. It's going to take that energy away so it doesn't get sent to the rider through the handlebars, making it a more comfortable ride. Our forks are quite bulletproof. They are meant to last a very long time, and there's not a lot of servicing that you have to do to this. But one thing we can do to make the lifespan of this of the actual suspension longer is cleaning the sanctions. The sanction is the shiny metal piece on the upper leg right here. When the actual suspension is activated, we're able to move the lower leg up and down to absorb the bumps. And really what we want to do is prevent anything getting inside these seals and working into the lower leg. As we can see on this bike, it's quite new. There's not a lot of debris, dirt, or anything else that's risen up off the road, but I do have a good example of a well-used suspension fork right here. So we can see the difference. It's very clear. A lot of dirt and debris here. Every time this suspension travels and cycles, so as it closes and opens for all of the bumps that you're hitting, it allows this dirt to wear itself into the fork. It's going to create some micro scratches on the sanctions, and that allows even more room for more dirt and debris to get in. So when we are cleaning a fork, we want to use a lubricant. So I'm just going to use an aerosolized lubricant. I'm going to use a soft lint-free rag. Rather than using a brush or something that has harsh bristles, we want to use something soft to make sure we don't work any of that dirt in and actually scratch our sanctions. So this is all about preventative. We want to make sure this is as clean as possible. So we can just wrap this around the leg, twist back and forth. And now already you can see the difference between the side that we've cleaned and the side that we have not. So nice, really shiny. The layer of lubricant that we've left on there from the rag is also going to be weather protection. So lubricant does not like water. It's aquaphilic, so it's going to be able to prevent water from trapping and catching here. If you have any old toothbrushes, anything like that, something with a short bristle, it can be good to get in and clean around the seals at the bottom. So it's another way, instead of just throwing away your old toothbrush, it's a good way to reuse that, get a little bit longer lifespan out of it, and it's going to help your bike and the suspension ride very, very soft. Another thing with suspension that a lot of people are not aware is that you can actually adjust how fast it acts, how soft and plush it feels. So if you have suspension on your bike, make sure whenever you're cycling around for a little bit of fun, play around with the different settings. The stiffer you make the fork, the faster the bike will go, but the less comfortable it will be. So there's always a trade-off. There's no such thing as a free lunch. If we fully open the suspension, it's going to be at its softest setting. I mean, even the smallest bump, it's going to absorb and rebound back, giving a really, really plush feel to the bike. So if anyone's having any discomfort with traps and shoulders, this is the first adjustment I would make on the bike. So now we feel comfortable, we know how to clean our sanctions, we know we're going to get the longest lifespan out of our suspension. The next thing that we are going to look at is our transmission and our drivetrain. If you want to get a little bit more information on this, today we're going to go through the basics of how to clean it. We already have a video on the Rad Academy about lubricating your transmission, and also in Derailleur 101, you can go through what the chain is, how it works, and we go into a bit of a deeper dive. So at the start, I want to explain what chain wear is. A lot of people in the bike industry refer to it as chain stretch, which is a very misleading term because the chain doesn't actually stretch. From Derailleur 101, we have this very simple chain pin board. So this shows us what actually goes into making a chain. So when we talk about chain stretch or elongation, the actual thing that's happening is these small pins and these bushings below are getting worn away and they're made a little bit smaller, which allows the chain to stretch. I'm going to be able to show you here an example of an old chain, a new chain, and also how to test to see if your chain has stretched or not. Bear with us as we swap camera angles on some of this. We just want to show you all of the different apparatus we have. So this is a chain wear indicator. They come in many different variations. I prefer a rudimentary one like this, which is basically a distance tester. You can get digital versions, but this is tried and true. So above we have a new chain and below we have a worn chain. So as I put this indicator in and drop it down on the chain, you will see that it cannot go inside. It has a nice gap between the chain and the tool itself, meaning that between this pin and the last pin, it hasn't stretched enough for this to fall inside, which is very, very good news. If we see when we test our old chain, we're going to take the exact same tool, we're going to grab one of the pins and we're going to release. This fits cleanly inside. So we now know that between these pins, there's enough distance that this last pin is going to start landing on the tooth of the sprocket rather than in between the nice gap, which is going to start to damage other parts of your bicycle. So if this chain wear indication is giving you a positive feed that you've gone past your stretch, replace your chain straight away, or you're going to start to wear out the sprocket on your chain ring, the cassette or free wheel attached to the wheel, and also the jockey wheels in your derailleur itself. So the next thing to look at is how do we prevent your chain from wearing? It is a very natural thing and it is going to happen depending on how much mileage you put on the bike, but we can slow it down by reducing friction. Friction is going to be all of the dirt and debris that's rubbing around the chain as it's rotating around the chain set. So we want to try and remove as much of this as possible and lubricate the chain afterwards. There are many different ways of doing this using harder chemicals, harder concentrated chemical degreasers. That's not something I would use at home. There are chain cleaning devices like this, which are going to put a bath of high concentrated liquid degreaser inside. It's going to have some bristles and brushes to clean the chain. This is an exceptional way of doing it because it's going to remove all of the chemical degreaser before we apply a new lubricant. My big concern about home mechanics and myself when I'm at home working on my bike using a harsh chemical degreaser is that we won't be able to remove all of the excess before re-lubricating, meaning the new fresh lubricant we put inside is going to be broke down by the degreaser over the next few rides, and often this can lead to actually more problems than no maintenance. So just to be safe, I would always clean my chain with an actual lubricant. This is going to dilute any of the particulates on the chain. It's going to loosen up some of the debris, and it's going to allow us to remove all of that and keep the chain as clean and friction free as possible. So we can go over to the bike. If you don't have a bike stand like I have here, this is quite simple to do on the kickstand or by leaning the saddle against your head. We're going to be backpedaling throughout this whole process, so we're not actually going to be moving the rear wheels. That's why it's quite easy to do at home. So we're just going to wrap our rag around the chain. We're going to use the bike mechanics to help us out and rotate that chain through the rag. This again is another great application for a toothbrush or an old nail brush or anything that you have around, because that's going to be able to get inside each of these pins and help us clean it out. But if you don't have that, just a lint-free rag is more than enough to get some lubrication in there. Spray lubricants are very, very thin and it would get washed off very easily off the chain. So to actually reapply lubricant, I'm going to use a drop bottle oil instead, a chain lubricant. So small bottle like this, instead of the aerosol, it's the exact same oil that's inside, but it's not mixed with any gases to propel that oil out at high velocity. So this is going to be more viscous or more thick, and it's going to allow it to coat the chain and hold on. So if you're getting some wet weather like we tend to get in Seattle, it's going to hold on to the chain. It's not going to drip off and instantly reveal the chain. One thing to be aware of is we have our top side on the bottom of the chain. As it rotates around the chain set, that's going to become the bottom side. So when lubricating the chain, I will start here. I will place the bottle under or over the chain rather, squeeze out a thin flow, moving my links around, and repeat this over the whole chain. Then I will go to the top side, which is the bottom here, and apply lubricant here as well while rotating the chain set fully around. After we've done this, it's important to go back to our rag, find a clean side of the rag so we're not contaminating the new clean lubrication on there, and remove the excess. The reason we want to clean off any of the excess oil is it can actually attract dirt and grime as we're cycling around. So we want a nice thin layer that's weatherproofing our chain and helping it stay clean, but we don't want any excess that's going to fly off onto our wheel, our rim, and it's going to attract a lot of dirt to it. So chain, super simple to clean, takes 2-3 minutes, and you are saving yourself quite a few dollars in actually swapping that chain out. And then, as we discussed earlier, if that chain gets too long, it's going to start to damage the teeth on the sprockets on the rear and the front. The next thing we're going to clean is the derailleur on the rear of the bike. For tonight's purposes, I'm going to actually do that in my hand. If you want to do it on the bike, it's as simple as rotating as we did before and applying the exact same principles I'm going to show you now. So to make it easier to see, we will pick up an older, more loved derailleur. So as we can see here, this is a derailleur which has had quite a lot of mileage on it. As we articulate, you can see how much is building up. On each of the jockey wheels, there's an actual crust where the chain doesn't make contact, and it's all been built up here. So the first thing that we're going to do is give this a really good bath of oil. A spray lubricant here is really good. If you see on my bottle, I actually have a pipe that attaches, that condenses the spray, so I can really get into all of the little small nooks and crannies inside the derailleur, and that's going to help me clean, and it's going to help me keep all of these pivot points. So all of the points where this derailleur articulates and moves, it's going to keep that friction free, and it's going to have my gear selection working much, much easier. It's going to keep the lifetime of our index or our shifting really good. If you want to learn more about this, I would encourage you to go back and look at Derailleur 101, but this is another easy job that any mechanic can do with a simple rag, with a spray of lubricant, and the last thing that I would use is a flathead screwdriver. That is very important to get in and take off some of the debris that is built up on the jockey wheels to make sure our chain is able to land quite smooth and easily between the teeth. And it's also going to prevent friction that's mounting up. So if you can see on the tip of my screwdriver, it's actually quite a lot of debris, and I haven't even given this a full clean yet. So just by digging through, that's going to prevent friction, that's going to prevent wear, and it's going to make it much easier for us to actually work on the bike when you do eventually have to get it serviced. So already, just from a quick 30 seconds, you can see the difference in that derailleur. That bottom cage is looking almost brand new. That was really in a bad state before we actually put the lubricant on there. And because we cleaned it with a lubricant instead of a degreaser, we are guaranteed that this is well lubricated and it's going to be working very well in the near future. That is really the basics on how to keep your drivetrain clean, keep it lubricated, keep it weatherproof, and that's going to give you the longest amount of miles in between services before problems come up for you. So that is the majority of what we need to do to prevent the need for an instant service on this bike. The next bike we're going to look at is our mini step-through version. So when we look at this bike, it's going to be really the exact same as any other bike that we're doing. We'll start with our tires. This bike has a suspension. If your bike has a rigid fork, there's very little, if anything, for us to do. You can clean a rigid fork, but it's really only about aesthetics. It's not going to affect the performance of the bike. So the main difference, obviously, is in the name. This is a folding bike. So we have a few hinge points. So just on the front of the bike, if we release our safety catch and we rotate the handlebars down, we have a main pin or a hinge that actuates when we are actually folding this bike. So one thing that we can do to elongate the lifespan of this pin and to make sure it's super easy for us to fold, I'm going to use a rag behind as a backdrop to catch any overspray. I'm going to spray a little bit of lubricant in any of the points which contact each other during the movement of the folding stem. So actually already that has become much nicer. Actuate the hinge 4 or 5 times. Go in and remove any excess lubricant so we don't attract and build up any dirt inside. But that is already working much nicer, very fluid. One finger, it comes straight down. You're ready to fold the bike away. You can repeat that process on the main hinge, whether you have a mini high step or a mini low boy, it's going to work in the same way. You have a safety catch, which opens out and folds the bike. So right down here, we're going to go in and do the exact same thing. So we can rotate the bike around, Make sure you take your safety catch off, which prevents the bike from folding. Take our spray of lubricant, hit our 2 main pivots, and clean off the excess again. So very, very simple. The last thing with this model that we're going to do is the folding pedals. So another part of the bike a lot of people maybe aren't aware of on a folding bike, to make sure storage is at the smallest, we're going to actually push in and fold our pedals. Keeping this actuating and folding quite smoothly is very simple. Again, rag for overspray, a little bit of lubricant inside, actuate the pedal a few times, and then clean off the excess. Super simple, really easy, doesn't take a lot of time to do it, doesn't take a lot of tools. So just to recap, all we've used is an aerosolized lubricant or a spray of lubricant, just like any house spray of lubricant you have, and a medium thickness chain oil. So these do come in different viscosities. You have dry, you have performance, and you have wet weather. Wet weather I will use in the winter because it's really much thicker and it's much harder for the rain to wash that off. Dry weather I generally find is a little bit too thin for transmissions. I would use it on cables to prevent weathering. And medium thickness I think is good pretty much 10 months of the year. So a rag, a flathead screwdriver, and some oil. That's all we've used today, and we've made sure that our bike is not only looking good, but performing good as well. So that is preventative maintenance. We are going to have a quick few minutes for any questions. Hopefully I'll be able to help you out. So just bear with me and I will grab my laptop now. And Mark from YouTube, can you recommend a bike stand for the Rad Rover 5? I don't really have any in particular stand that I love more than anything else. Doesn't really matter that it's a Rad Rover 5. It's going to attach to the bike stand in the exact same way we have any of our bikes. So most of the time I'm clamping by the seat collar. That seat pillar is going to be the easiest place to actually rotate it from. And anything really, whenever I'm picking a bike stand, the main things that I look for is a good name brand. Generally, you're going to find that they have better hinge points, and through constant use of the actual stand, it's not going to deteriorate as fast. But the real important thing for me is having something that has a large footprint, something that's very stable. When we go to work on bottom brackets and chain sets, the amount of Newton meters of force we need to generate, and also for removing these high Newton meter items, it's going to be really important that your bike stand is stable and holds the bike safely for you. So hopefully, Mark, that helps you out. But anything that we have here, anything that you find in a general good bike store is going to help you out with that. We have an Instagram question saying, what's the name of the lubricant? Well, there are many different types. Chain oils, as I explained, come in generally 3 different thicknesses: dry, medium, and wet. If you're only going to get one, which is more than enough for any home mechanic, I would pick medium. It's the best of both worlds. It's not too thin that it's going to drip off. It's not too wet that it's going to spray off and transfer everywhere else. Kelly from Facebook asked, how often do you lubricate your chain? This is a more difficult one to answer. It really depends on how much you're using the bike and what kind of conditions the bike is seeing. So the best test that I would normally do, and I can do it right now, is run my hand over the chain. And when I look, I get a little bit of oil residue, but no powder, no dirt, no debris inside. So that tells me instantly this chain does have a coating of oil, but it's not contaminated. During the worst weather in winter, I would generally do the chain probably once a week or so, just because all of that oil is going to get washed off that little bit faster. During the summer months, you could get away with 6 weeks or 8 weeks, as long as the lubricant on there is still there and not contaminated. So they're the 2 questions you should ask yourself. Is there oil on your chain? So the touch test will let you know that. Is there debris on there? So visually we can check that. And also during the touch test, if you find that there's a powder or filament there, that's time to wash off the old lubricant and apply a new lubricant. David is asking, how about prep for winter storage, deflating tires, battery fully charged, anything else that we can do? So for any bike, when you're putting it away, one of the easiest things that you can do is exactly what we've done here. We want you to lubricate the bike, give it a protective coating, make sure that the weathering is not going to affect that bike. A lot of bike storage areas are not climate controlled. So on an electric bike, if you're not going to use the bike for a very long time, we would suggest discharging your battery to about 75%. Anything below 100 is good, but 75 is really that magic number to make sure you get that longevity or good lifespan out of the battery before storing it. I also personally remove my battery. My bike storage is not temperature controlled, and I know that will fluctuate the actual battery itself. So whenever I park my bike, and as an added safety measure and as a preventative maintenance measure, I will remove the battery, bring it inside, keep it safe and keep it climate controlled. So long-term storage, decharge the battery to 75% ideally. So that is really going to help out. Gavin Uhrig, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, has requested a shout out. So I feel I kind of have to do that one. It's an easy one to do. So definitely giving you a shout out. Thanks for joining us today. Salt City Mom on Instagram. If I live in a state where it snows, can you store the bike outside in a covered waterproof shed, bringing the battery indoors for storage? So yes, you've already answered the one thing that I would have said, bring that battery inside. But if you are covering it in a waterproof shed, sometimes waterproof membranes are not very breathable. So what we've just talked about with oiling and giving that weatherproof coating is going to be very important. But yes, that sounds like a perfect place to store the bike as long as you're taking the battery out. Shelley from Facebook, what product did you use to clean the fork sanctions? So for cleaning the sanctions, I use an aerosolized lubricant. So the brand doesn't really matter too much. Mainly in testing between different brands, the main thing we found is that some cans will have a little bit more oil inside and a little bit less aerosol, which is really a cost preventing measure, but it doesn't matter. Go to your local hardware store, go to your bike store, come out to Rad. These are all things that we sell in any service area. So any type of a spray lubricant is good. It's nice and thin and it's going to remove dirt, but leaving that nice filament. Somebody has asked, do we have a recommendation for squeaky or noisy brakes? Should we lubricate them? Never. Never lubricate a brake system. Brake systems work based on friction. So with a mechanical disc brake, a classic rim brake, you are applying a brake pad that is grabbing the wheel and slowing the rotation. And that's how you're actually scrubbing off or reducing your velocity. If you lubricate your brakes, that is going to prevent that friction from happening, and it's going to prevent your bike from stopping. On top of that, it will compound to a problem if you're having a squeaky or noisy brake, which is kind of the most common thing and the most common reason why people will lubricate their brakes. But never lubricate a brake system. It works on friction, and in this instance, friction is what we desire. So on all of the other components, we're trying to reduce the level of friction. On brakes, more friction means stronger brakes. So never lubricate that. Okay, so if that is all on the question front, I really, really appreciate you all joining us here. Make sure that you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Our handle is @RadPowerBikes. If you've liked the content today, please leave us a comment below. Let us know if there's future classes that you would like us to hold or anything else. I have been David Smith, my usual glove drop. I'm out of here. Have a great night.